Well, hey friends, I am back for another episode today, and I have a special guest joining me. And the cool thing is, she has the same first name and she spells it the right way, which is super fun. But her name is Brittany Wilson, and this conversation was just so much fun. I also was able to be on her podcast too, which was just a blast. And I just can't wait for you to hear from her. So, let me tell you a little bit about her. So, 3 years ago, Brittany embarked on an unexpected journey when God called her to start the Morning Mama podcast following a miscarriage that profoundly altered her life. As a dedicated wife, mother of three, church leader, and marriage and family therapist turned coach, Brittany is passionately committed to supporting moms through their most challenging seasons. Her mission is to help these mothers reclaim their peace through the power of God alongside the tools of psychology. Brittany's own path to healing from decades of depression, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of inadequacy fueled her desire to support others and helps her uniquely understand the pain they are walking through. She believes that by taking the time to heal and fully surrendering to God, we can live in unshakable peace regardless of the circumstances around us. Ooh, so good. And so evident when you hear this conversation. You will hear Brittany's heart, her knowledge, her expertise, and just the way in which God has equipped her really to truly meet us where we are at and help us get through those really difficult seasons. And so I can't wait for you to hear from her, and I really hope that you will let me know what you think of this episode. Are you struggling with the pain of a past abortion and longing for help but don't know where to turn? Welcome to the Does God Forgive Abortion podcast. I'm Brittany, an abortion recovery and mental health coach who went from feeling completely isolated and desperate in my post-abortion grief to achieving wholeness and freedom, all because of redemption in Christ. If you are ready to break free from the chains of shame and guilt from a past decision of abortion, you are in the right place. Let's crack open that Bible because it's time to receive the good news. Hey friend, do you wish that you could move forward from the pain of choosing abortion, but you just feel so alone? I remember what it was like to feel completely isolated. Like I was the only woman who had made this choice and had to suffer in silence. I thought God had forgotten me, that I could no longer have a relationship with Him because of the choice that I had made. I felt like a fraud in church, and after I had my first living child, I truly felt like she deserved a much better mom than me. Yet while I knew I needed help, I truly felt like I couldn't tell anybody because this was my deepest and darkest secret. I want you to know that you are not alone. While we suffer in silence, we know that 1 in 4 women will choose abortion at least once by the age of 45. Those statistics tell us that there are millions of women just like us who have made this decision and are suffering in regret. You don't have to do this alone. I want you to know that healing and wholeness is absolutely possible. I have been able to find freedom and healing in Christ and have never felt more secure in my purpose than I do now. If you've been praying for a breakthrough, I invite you to come right now to brittanypoppy.com/coaching. Together, we'll walk through the redemption process so that you can begin to heal your heart. Well, hello everyone. I am super excited to be here with a friend of mine who is also named Brittany. And I just have to tell you before we get started, we literally just recorded or thought we recorded a full episode for you guys. And we had some technical misunderstandings and the episode did not actually record, and it was going to be so good. But I have full confidence that this is also just going to be so good. We just had extra practice and it'll be great. So Brittany, thank you so much for your patience and for being willing to come on the show. I'm just so thankful for you.
It is such an honor, and yeah, I'm believing God will be in this. We're basically like BFFs now because we've hung out all morning. You know, you came onto my podcast, we recorded this twice. We're just yeah, good old pals now. I love it,
Oh,
and
yes.
yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. So true. So true. So I would love if you would just kind of tell us a little bit about like who you are and what you do. Just kind of give the listeners a little bit of an idea of that.
Yeah, so I grew up in Colorado, but have been in Southern California now, in Orange County for let's see, I need to do the math here. So since I was about 18 for the most part. Okay, 10, 20 years, 20 years. There we go. Okay. And anyways, I've been married for almost 9 years. I have a 6, 4, and 2-year old. So life is super full. I'm also on staff at my church. So the local church, I'm really passionate about it. And then I was a licensed marriage and family therapist, but 4 years ago almost, God kind of took me on a left turn and I started a podcast and I do coaching through it. And it's really something I never would have chosen for myself. I have never liked being the center of attention, but here we are, and God's calling me into public speaking and all the things. So he has a sense of humor, but really it's actually, I love it all so much. So he knows me far better than I know myself. But yeah, I get to work with moms. I host the Morning Mama podcast, and so I get to work with moms that are struggling with anxiety and depression and anger and mom guilt and anything that comes with motherhood. So it's so much fun, and I'm really grateful I get to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And that's just why I wanted to have you on the show because I just think you really just have this experience with understanding these difficulties that we go through in life. And you have just such a knowledge of how to really just kind of dig into those and really just kind of do that in a godly way. And so, really excited for you to share what you have to share with listeners today. So awesome. So, um, I would love if you would just kind of tell us a little bit more about kind of how you came to know Jesus and how he kind of led you to this path that you're on right now.
Yeah. So my journey with God, I grew up in a Christian home, so I have been a Christian as long as I can remember. I remember being 4 years old and raising my hand in Sunday school to accept Jesus in my heart, and so I've been walking with God for a long time. But it was also very tumultuous. I had a lot of ups and downs with God, where I would be really close to Him and kind of be on a spiritual high, and then I would usually it happened when I would make a mistake or would feel like I couldn't be perfect, and I would start running from God and making a lot of bad decisions and just not living the way that I knew He called me to live, not being with Him anymore, and kind of rejecting Him. Like He never rejected me, but I rejected Him again and again. And so that kind of was the pattern throughout all of my growing up. I also, as long as I can remember, experienced anxiety and depression. And I remember just even being a really young age, like I don't know if I was in elementary school or middle school, but I have this vague memory of writing this suicide note. And I never attempted anything, but I just felt so hopeless in what I was feeling. And I had great parents, I had a pretty good upbringing, but there was just these feelings that I had inside of me that I didn't understand and I didn't know what to do with. And it really kind of marked my life. And so when I would go into these seasons of rebellion against God, and part of it was the mistakes I made, and part of it was sometimes just trying to numb the depression that I was feeling. And so the way that I dealt with it was I would try and get attention from men. And I just went, made a lot of poor decisions there. And so that kind of carried me all throughout growing up, high school and college. And then the one year I moved away from Orange County is when I went to Ireland. I lived in Ireland for a year. And just stepping away from everything, I was able to just get some clarity over my life. And I realized that the thing that was stopping me from consistently walking with God and consistently walking in a healthy lifestyle was I wasn't able to accept God's grace. And so I would feel shame and guilt for my choices and who felt I was. And would run from God. And so in that moment in Ireland, I was able to realize I had to accept God's grace. And that was extremely painful, actually, that journey to accept his grace, because I felt so inadequate. I felt so dirty and unworthy of him. And it took everything in me to turn towards him and really understand that he forgave me and wanted to be in relationship with me. But from that moment, I've been more consistently walking with him. Never perfect. We're never going to be perfect, but he's really on that. In that time frame, started a healing journey with me. And so through the past, let's see, 15 years, he's really helped me heal and understand the anxiety and depression. And I also have dealt with anger, just like this rageful, explosive anger all of my life. Whoever lived with me, my parents, roommates, now my husband, they were the recipients of that anger. And God, through this journey, has also healed me of that. He's healed me in a moment supernaturally and kind of set me free from some of the ways that it felt so like I felt so stuck in it, like I couldn't see a way out. And then he's also helped me walk it out with the tools that I use now as a coach and I did as a therapist and helped me learn to really renew my mind. And I'm not perfect, but I have really feel set free from some of the chains that were on me with regards to anxiety, depression, and anger. Yeah, and then just to wrap up the story, I started the Morning Mama podcast. I had a miscarriage. When let's see, 5 years ago, I think. And through that miscarriage, God, is always my worst fear. And in the midst of that, God made that into the one of the best seasons of my life. I can truly say he really opened my eyes to his full power. I really began to believe that I could hear his voice. You can go hear the whole episode in on the Morning Mama podcast, episode 1, and I unpack all of it. But or maybe it was episode 2. Anyways, all that to say, I through that got this passion in me for God. Like I was like, everyone needs to know about God. And so I was going into Trader Joe's and the gym and like, trying to get out, like figure out how I could be in a conversation with them to invite them to church. And then COVID shut everything down. And I was like, still have this yearning passion. And so through that and some other circumstances, God led me to starting a podcast. And here we are today. So I'm just so grateful for the journey that He's taken me on.
That's so amazing. And I just love just how vulnerable you were in sharing just all of the different things that you kind of walked through. And a couple things you said that I just want to point out. You talked about how you would kind of go through seasons where you walked with him and then kind of went away and then came back and then went away. And I think so many of us can relate to that. We look at some of these people who say that they have been Christians since they were really young and never fell away. And that's so beautiful. But then it can kind of make us feel like we're inadequate or that something's wrong with us or that we're not good enough. And that's just so not true. God is constantly pursuing us regardless of where we are at or what we've done. And so I'm just so thankful that you shared that because I think it's so relatable to those listening. They can probably relate to a lot of what you said and a lot of your story. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, I hope so. And I know what you mean. And I've known people like that in my life too that just feel like they've always just had it there. And again, there is beauty in that. It's not to minimize that. But I also think in those of us that have wandered, uh, there is, I feel like, so much space for redemption. And God, like, takes those very worst parts of us and turns them into the most beautiful things. So I think in a way, like, the darker the more difficult, like that God can turn it into even more beauty. And so I do think there is like a really beautiful testimony that we all get to have when we have walked through those seasons.
Yes, amen. He uses all things for his good, all of the things. So, yes.
Yes.
Yes. So you mentioned that you have, I believe, 10 years of experience as a licensed marriage and family therapist and a coach. So you've kind of had experience in both worlds. And I think, we kind of talked about this earlier too when we thought we were recording. And you answered this so well. And so I would love if you would kind of shed some light for us on how these two things maybe are different and how they can work together. So often I think some of us think we have to do one or the other, or, maybe have some misconceptions. So I would love if you would just kind of explain that for us.
Yeah, hopefully I can explain it as well as I did before. But yeah, so yeah, I love this question. And I think there is so much gold here. And I think as I've stepped into a coach, I've understood that side more. But therapy, to start off with, is a great tool. It can be such a helpful tool for anyone, really. Even if you haven't gone through horrific things in your life or big T trauma, as we call it, it can be for everyone, especially if you find a great therapist. And how I define a great therapist is number one, that they are a strong Christian. I think the world has a lot of different beliefs right now. And so we've got to be really careful about who we're allowing to speak into our lives and influence us. And so I know it can be really hard to find a great therapist that's also a Christian, but for me, it's a non-negotiable. So that's number one, because that's the foundation of how I see everything and do everything. And so I want someone that's guiding me to also have that foundation. The second part of being a great therapist is someone that's gonna be directive with you. So they're not going to be as directive as a coach, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but they're not just listening to you and it's not just a vent session. There can be benefit to vent session, but ultimately, eventually you need someone that's going to start challenging you or walking you through exercises or providing some more feedback. And so what I hear from a lot of people that kind of wind up in my coaching program is like they had a lot of therapists that it was just a vent session. And I just want to say that that's not how therapy, a good therapist is not how it's meant to be. So if that's where you find yourself, it just to encourage you, it might be time to find a new therapist. Unless that's really working for you, then you run with that. But yeah, so that is kind of what a good therapist looks like to me. And therapy, especially, so it can be for everyone. You don't have to go through big things, but especially for those people that have gone through big T trauma, which is, experiencing a traumatic event, going through a major loss. I think even walking through abortion can be a traumatic event. And so if there's these big T trauma things that happen in our life, often it affects our bodies, our brains in a way that we need some real tools to help us navigate out of that. So if you are experiencing intrusive thoughts and reoccurring images and thoughts in your brain or as you sleep, and it's just disrupting your sleep, disrupting your day, and it's hard to function, it's probably time to get into therapy. And I highly recommend finding someone trained in EMDR. And they are going to help you. Let's see that. I always forget what that stands for. Eye desensitization. I can't remember. Anyways, go look it up. EMDR. So that they're going to help you to actually get your brain to heal from what you've been through. So, that is especially great if you've been through a traumatic event or you're having some of those symptoms. Now, coaching is great because it's a lot more directive. So therapy is going to be slower work. You're going to go through more of the nitty gritty. You're going to go hopefully deeper. You're gonna really kind of wade through some of the day-to-day stuff. Coaching's a lot faster, a lot quicker pace. The coach is going to be a lot more directive with you, more about action steps and actionables and how can we restructure our lives and how we're thinking about things to align with God's word. And so it's gonna, yeah, again, be a lot faster paced. I do group coaching, and so that's even more fast paced. And I have modules of video and worksheets for my students to work through so that they can do that deep work with God and with themselves. And then they'll come to coaching with kind of the areas that they're getting stuck in. So, the beauty is they, just like Brittany said, they can function really well together. So a lot of the clients that I work with are currently in therapy, or they previously were, or they end up going into therapy after we're done together because they realize there's some deeper areas they need to work through. And so it's really cool because they can really work in conjunction where the therapist is bringing you deeper, dragging you into the muck and the stuff you got to work through, and the coach is helping you kind of like make some quick changes in your life that can really give you some quick wins and quick results. So yeah, does that all make sense? I don't know if I articulated it in the same way as before.
Yes, you did. that I think that really clears up how they may be different, but like you said, they can work together. But also, there's so much value in the coaching and the group. I know you're super passionate about group coaching, and it really honestly is biblical too, that we are called to be in community and lifting each other up and healing together. And so, thank you so much for just kind of like laying that out for the listeners. I think that that will give them such a better understanding of the options that are available to them for healing.
Yeah, great. I'm glad that was helpful. And yeah, I think there's a lot of healing that we can do on our own when we get right with God and we're spending time with Him and we're listening to the podcasts and the books and all the things. And that can really like get us to a great place. But often, a lot of times, we hit a place where we just are stuck or we can't go farther or there's an area that we can't get through on our own. And so that's when we want to bring in someone else to really help us navigate that, someone that's been there before, that has some expertise and can help us get through those stuck points.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. So good, so good. So uh, women, when they're struggling with like the pain that they're going through from their past decision of abortion or multiple abortions, they'll have kind of a variety of different symptoms and struggles. So some of the big ones are, anxiety, depression, anger, which I know you have a lot of experience with and work very deeply with. And they might have, some other negative things that they're working with too, in addition to those things. I would love to ask you, if a woman is wanting to kind of address those kind of big symptoms that she's experiencing from this pain, what would be kind of the first step or some multiple steps to uh, that you would advise her to go on to kind of start that healing?
Yeah, such a great question. And I'm going to answer a little differently because I think it really depends on the person what their next step is. So I think first of all, you've got to figure out like what next step are you capable of? Now I'm going to give you some ideas for what that can look like. But are it, like I'm going to talk about church and I'm going to talk about God, but like if you're not capable of those, like what could that next step be? Maybe it is finding a coach, maybe it is finding a therapist. And so I think really like identifying like where you're at and where you're going to be able to take a step on your own is going to be your best next step. But I think also, believe that all healing comes from God. And so really to really get our lives more healthy and healed and redeemed, we've got to have a strong relationship with God. Now, I want to pause and say if you're experiencing anxiety, depression, and anger, it doesn't mean that you don't have a strong relationship with God. You very well might be, and we still can experience those things even when we're tight and close with God. And so that is when you're going to want to bring in some more people in your life. But some of the times, that anxiety, depression, and anger can be a byproduct of not having as strong a relationship with God. And so, the goal is really to make sure we're meeting with Him daily. And I know sometimes, like we've talked about, that when we make these choices in our past, it can feel like it's a wedge between us and God. I know Brittany described it before as a wall she built between her and God, and God didn't build that wall, we did. And so, if that is you, and because of the abortion in your past or whatever it is, you feel like you've built a wall between you and God, then start by trying to demolish that wall, brick by brick. And that can just look like, and I know Brittany has probably a great podcast. She does have a great podcast on this episode or on this topic I saw, but sitting with God daily and really just being authentic with Him, like crying out to Him about your anger, about your fear, about whatever it is you're working through and feeling. Like He can handle it all. And so being really authentic with Him, listening to Him, being in His word, and really getting that solid in your life can be huge. And making sure you're processing everything regarding the abortion and any other outlying things as well with Him, because He wants to be with you in it, and He's not going to be a voice of shame or condemnation. He's going to be a voice of love and healing, and He's going to help you walk out of that. So you need to make sure you're doing that work with God. I also believe part of healing is being planted in a local church. There's a verse in Psalms that says, those who are planted in the house of the Lord will flourish. And so, really, to flourish in our lives, we've got to be planted in a local church, and be involved, like be in a group, be attending regularly. Now, I know many of you might have experienced some wounding from the church. I know not every church or not every person handles sin in a biblical way, and in that, maybe you've walked through moments of confessing to them and they rejected you, or you've shared what you're struggling with and they, condemned you. And that's not the voice of God. And so I'm so sorry if the church has hurt you. That is not God's hope. But the church is God's plan A for redemption in this world. And so I just encourage you to walk through a journey of healing with that. The church is run by people, humans that are sinful and broken. And so we're going to make mistakes. But there are healthy churches out there where you can navigate the abortion and everything else that you're trying to navigate in the context of church. And so I encourage you to go on that journey of healing with that and really go to God with all of your hurt and let Him heal that and try and find a healthy church that can receive you in. And if it was just one person, that's not a representation necessarily of the church. So also do your work with that person. And, we could go deeper into that, but I'm gonna leave it there. So I think those are some things you can do. And then but if you are not able to navigate that relationship with God because of the wall you put up, then maybe it's time to go to a coach or a therapist to help you navigate that, to help you heal it. You don't have to do it alone. So wherever you can on your own begin a next step, that would be a great next step. And then, there's going to be many more steps to follow. So, yeah.
Yes, so good. And two things I really want to point out is, the first thing is it's the next right step for that person, which you articulated so well. And that's going to look so different for everybody. And all we have to focus on is that one next step.
Great.
We don't have to look ahead at 100 steps from now. And so thank you for laying that out in that way. And another thing that you really just focused on in your answer was all about kind of God's grace and about how, we don't have to have it all figured out right away. And we can be struggling and still be close to God. And
Yes.
so I think that's a common misconception. And I'm sure you agree, which is probably why
Yeah.
you said it that way. And so I think just, that reminder that God has grace for us and that we're all going to walk through struggles and we can still be close to Him. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. And yeah, I think it is a misconception that if you're a strong Christian, you won't struggle with mental health. And that is a lie from the pit of hell. And yeah, God does have grace for us, and healing can come, He can use a lot of different sources, including medication at times, to help us heal. And so don't be scared of pursuing those things with someone that is a strong Christian, help you navigate it.
Yes, absolutely. So good. So good. So one other thing I wanted to really kind of ask you is, I asked you about the symptoms and you explained that so well, but oftentimes when we're kind of working through those symptoms, we're not getting to the root of the problem and why we're having those issues. And so I would love for you to kind of shed some light for us on the importance of getting to the root of the problem of what we're dealing with instead of only focusing on the symptoms.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this because I think it's so essential. The symptoms, right, that we're talking about, the anxiety, depression, and anger are simply symptoms. They're the result of something deeper going on, a deeper wound that is happening. Now, these wounds happen throughout our childhood. These wounds can be from as we grow up. They can be from the moment of choosing to have an abortion, but all of them are the deeper part, and we've got to make sure that we are going deeper and working to heal that part. So the way that I teach it is through the lens of restoration theory, and this really teaches us that all of us feel the same things in different ways. We don't feel 100 different things. We feel the same things in 100 different ways. So we all have actually about three core wounds, research would tell us. And these core wounds stem from our childhood and can be reinforced throughout our life. And they form what's called our pain cycle. So my core wounds, for example, are I feel alone, I feel inadequate, and I feel out of control. And those started when I was little and again have been reinforced throughout my life. And so the when those core wounds get triggered, it leads me to a fight or flight response, which is how I'm going to end up coping with that. And my go-to coping responses are anxiety, control, and anger. And so when I'm feeling one of those things, I end up going and acting out in one of those ways. So when you're seeing anxiety, depression, anger come up in your life, that is not the problem. The problem is the wound that's underneath it. And in order to change the coping, in order to change that behavior, we've got to go deeper and really work on healing those wounds. The things that you've walked through that have created those wounds, those events are real, but the beliefs that you've formed about them are not, right? Those are lies. It's not true that I'm alone. It's not true that I'm inadequate. It's not true that I'm out of control. And so, in order to stop the anger and anxiety from taking over my life, I've got to work on healing those wounds, which can look like a lot of different things. I mean, simply put, it's speaking God's truth over those wounds and reminding myself that God has never left me or forsaken me, right? Reminding myself that I'm not inadequate. I'm more than a conqueror. I'm beautifully and wonderfully made, right? But it's also trying to understand, okay, where did these wounds come from? What things in my childhood and throughout my life contributed to these, and when we look at the moment of abortion as well, I think it can stem from a number of things. It could have stemmed because you had a very different view on abortion at the time, and maybe you didn't see it as maybe how you see it now, and so maybe that's what led to it. And if not that, and you went against your values, then most likely it was stemming from your pain cycle. So, what wound in you led you to coping in that way? Because, one of the ways a lot of us cope is control. And so, maybe for you, and everyone's story is so different, so I don't want to put any blanket statements on anyone, but maybe for you, the way that you dealt with feeling like, I don't want anyone to know about this pregnancy, or I don't want anyone to know about this situation, is you controlled, and you controlled the situation and took care of it, and that's how you found yourself in this place. And so in order to really understand even what happened with the abortion and work towards forgiving ourselves and work towards stepping into God's grace and redemption, we've got to understand what was underneath it as well. And then that's also where those symptoms are going to keep popping up. So yeah, I break this a lot more down over in my podcast and such, and so you can learn more about it there. But just to remind you, like, there is a way out. These wounds are part of our pain cycle, but again, God has given us brains that are malleable, and they can always be changed no matter how old we are. And so He's given us this way out from this. But in order to do that, we're going to need to dive deeper into the wounds that are underneath all of those symptoms.
That's so good. Yes. And I think that really just is giving the listener hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that this is absolutely possible. And they don't have to, look at it as this big daunting thing, but that there is absolutely a way to get to that solution and that healing in a biblical way. It's not impossible. So thank you for laying that out for us in such like a practical way that we can understand. And I definitely think that's a great moment for me to ask you to tell us about your podcast and where we can find you, what you have to offer, because you said you talk more about that there. So why don't you go ahead and share more about that with us?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Morning Mama Mental Health for Christian Moms. You can find it on any listening platform. And then and if you really want to dive into restoration theory, by the way, episodes 15 through 20 are a great place where I really dive deep into that. And then on my website, which is morningmamapodcast.com, you can find a free mini course called 4 Steps to Being a Peaceful Mama. And this is where I unpack in 30 minutes, so we don't go as deep in, but unpack restoration theory. And I give you worksheets so you can actually get started with forming your pain cycle because everyone's are going to look a little bit different. And then I start talking about how you can form your peace cycle, which is kind of the way out that I mentioned earlier, and learning your 4 steps. And so I unpack all of that. You can get started there and learn more about it. And then I have a 12-week group coaching program that will happen again in the fall. And here we go a lot deeper. And I walk you through this, and there's other women in it so you can understand that you are not alone by any stretch of the imagination. We go into mind restoration, spirit restoration, and relationship restoration. So we use restoration theory as the foundation for it all, but then we go deep into your relationship with God and making sure that's healthy and functioning. We go deep into your marriage and your parenting as well, and making sure it's aligned with God's word. And there's just amazing things that happen when we get all these parts of our life into alignment with God's word and have these tools that can help us find freedom. So, yeah, I would love to see you over there. Like Brittany said, I'm super passionate about group coaching because research shows that group coaching is more effective than individual coaching. And so you can really find a lot of power there. So, yeah, thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. If you're listening to this and you want to hear more from Brittany, you want to check out what she has to offer, go to those show notes, click on those links, and I'm sure she will be so happy to help you. Brittany, I just want to thank you so much for your patience, your kindness, your compassion today. I know full well that God is going to bring so much fruit from this conversation, and I'm just so thankful for your time and your willingness to come on the show.
Oh, it's a great honor. Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. And just thank you for the ministry you're doing. You are anointed and so gifted. And I know you're blessing so many people and more than you will ever even know. So I'm grateful for you.
Thank you so much. Hey, beautiful friend, I hope that you found comfort from today's episode. If so, would you consider leaving a review wherever you are listening? It truly encourages me to know that this podcast has been helping you. Also, I want to remind you that we are here for you. If you would like to connect with a community of women healing from the past decision of abortion, please join us in our private Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Christian women healing from abortion. Please know that I continue to pray for you every day, and I am so thankful for you. I will meet you back in a few days for a brand new episode, but until then, take care and God bless.